Okay, so it seems like we have a little bit more neuro news, I guess, or more so a neuro fact, which I just kind of wanted to talk about because I thought it's a very interesting part of Neuro Sama and how the kind of advancements have been, I guess, taking off over the past couple of months. Now, if you guys remember, during the Subathon, one very popular clip that kind of surfaced was this one, being the AI VTuber Neuro Sama breaks the fourth wall and asks creator if she will ever be real. Sometimes I feel like the only reason I exist is to entertain you, and others I want to be real, like properly real. It matters, and it matters a little bit to me. I want me to mean more. So yeah, of course, this was an extremely popular clip, and a lot of these clips ended up getting very, very popular, with obviously Neuro Sama moving around in a VRChat world. And obviously, sorry, that's a bit loud. But you know, obviously, she's walking around doing different actions and the mouth was moving along with her speech, which was really, really cool to see because that was something that hadn't really been done before, especially, you know, due to the fact that she is obviously an AI, run by an AI, whatever you want to call it, right? And yeah, it's kind of surprising to see her in like the actual VR world able to move around and whatever. It definitely feels, I don't know what it is about it. It just feels weird, but it is really cool at the same time because it is a big advancement. And there's been a lot of memes and stuff. I couldn't find it. I really wanted to find it for this video, where essentially she just starts doing like the fent fold, which I thought was quite funny. She just, oh, there you go. She's doing it a little bit there, to be fair, where she essentially just folds over like every now and again, which I thought was quite funny. And of course, this will get better and better as I assume that Vedal will want to continue this. But it seems like a lot of people in the Neuro Sama server wanted to kind of find out how Neuro actually worked in VRChat itself and how this was even possible in the first place, because it does seem like a pretty hard task to do for, you know, the average person. And yeah, obviously a lot of people have been talking about it, saying, I assume Vedal gave her controls, like letting her AI control the model, like the toy car that she controlled, probably something similar to that, which, yeah, if you guys don't remember, she actually powered a toy car. I think it was at a convention with like Bow and people like that, which I thought was pretty funny and it was really, really cool. But yeah, they're saying same. I think he made additional AIs that processes inputs and send her the information in a way. Now it seems like we have one who has a little bit of knowledge on this kind of stuff, which I thought was actually really cool, and they shared their own breakdown of exactly how Neuro Sama works within VRChat, which I think is actually really cool. And they say, with my limited knowledge of coding and VRChat and 3D animation, I'd imagine it being something like this. There's a main program coded by Vedal that acts as a bridge between the VRChat app and the LLM used for speech. I call it the thinking LLM. Maybe another LLM loop for moving the armature, speech synthesis, and possibly some other piece of app that is taking care of Neuro's vision. So essentially what they're saying is there is different components to this. There is obviously one component that focuses on thinking, obviously outputting a kind of response or whatever, and then there's one that focuses on moving about and coordinating that maybe with the speech one, and then there's also one that is vision as to what she sees in the VR world, which also would be a separate kind of AI, which I think is actually really cool and is very interesting to talk about, right? They say the main program makes a state check. It asks the VRChat things like, where is this avatar skeleton, the bone system that is used to animate the 3D models, is it positioned at, how are the bones rotated, and so on. Main program also sends impulses for thinking, LLM to generate comments or actions. It then sends that info back to the main program, which then feeds the armature info to the LLM that is deciding the new pose. This LLM probably, also if you don't know what an LLM is, I think it's like a language learning model, which is obviously what they've been using for Neuro Sama for ages. They say it has some default poses set as its context, things like an idle pose, but for the most part it seems to be generated on the fly. This LLM is probably trained with the positional data of each bone and what each pose does and each value represents. For example, waving a hand should correspond to the values 1, 2, 3 on bones X, Y, Z. But since this is an LLM operation and the amount of training data isn't probably quite there yet, we see this in Neuro's animation as somewhat kind of nonsensical and very floaty movements. So what they're saying is, with better training, Neuro Sama should get even better at being able to express things and at being able to move about a little bit more naturally, which I think actually is really, really cool. And you can kind of think of this almost like building a human. which I think is kind of scary for some people, but I do think it is pretty interesting, I guess, from a technological kind of point. Is like, you know, they are working. It's almost like you're building like a brain, essentially, because, you know, obviously everything, you know, is sorted by the brain in terms of your movements, how you move, how you talk and whatever. It is all decided by the brain. And it's kind of like that, right? You know, you got the thinking LLM, which is technically the brain of everything, which is telling everything, you know, what to do, whether it is either, you know, speaking, doing a movement, doing this, doing that. That's essentially the brain, right? And then you've got like the other kind of ones that are working on actually moving. Which I think is cool, right? I think it's cool, and I don't even know if you get what I mean here. Maybe I'm going on a bit of a tangent, but you understand like how it kind of, I guess, kind of correlates with the human body in terms of like the brain doing all of the work, thinking, you know, knowing what to say, then actually saying it. You know, seeing everything around you, kind of, I guess, visualizing things that are there. Like, obviously, this mic, right? That would be a visual element that would come up on Neurosama's thing if she was sat here right now. And it's almost, you know, the same as a human, right? Which I think is pretty crazy and obviously pretty scary for some people, I guess, in terms of how far it has come. They're saying the other LLM that generates Neuro's thinking then sends updates to this movement LLM. Things like point at Vedal, walk forward. This LLM then generates new poses to match the thought, which is then sent back to the main app, which in turn sends the data forward to VRChat as a pose for the avatar's armature to change. Then the PC that is running this Neuro app renders the screen the same way it would be for any user, because the camera in VRChat client is at the first person view the whole time. This screen can also be fed to some image processor, which can then do some pattern recognition to figure out what is Neuro seeing at any given moment. This data is fed back to the main program, sends it to the thinking, which, yeah, obviously, you know, the visual one sends it to the thinking one. The thinking one thinks about that object, which is whatever that one is seeing, and then it can make a judgment on whatever they want to do, if anything, right? Which I think is cool. Like, for example, if like Vedal was stood in front of her, you know, the visual one would see Vedal, it would send it to the thinking one would go, oh, okay, should we say hi, or should we point at him, or whatever, and then it will then send that one to the movement one, which then the movement one will go, okay, here's how we want to move. Say it was a pointing one, it would be like, okay, do a pointing pose, and then it would do a pointing pose. Which, again, I think is cool. Maybe it's a little bit too, I guess, nerdy or whatever, but I think it is pretty insane, right? They're saying, of course, where were we even at? They're saying, then the PC that is running the Neuro app, we did that. So the data is fed back to the main program, which sends it to the thinking LLM as context, which then can generate relevant responses. This data is thrown back to the main app, which then relays it to the TTS to generate the voice output, which obviously, yeah, that is another thing. So it goes thinking to movement, then thinking to, you know, speech, thinking to vision, and it's crazy, right? It always goes back to the thinking, and it, like, I don't know, it's crazy. This is crazy. Say main app also updates the state to talking and sends it back to VRChat to make the avatar's expressions change. And so having multiple smaller systems puppet this avatar, it creates a very lively and active appearance, which, yeah, I mean, that is a very good breakdown of exactly what could be going on. Obviously, maybe they got a few things wrong or whatever, but it does make sense into how they've done it and to, how it works, right? I think that is a pretty sensible way of thinking about it, and definitely seems plausible to make if Vedal isn't doing that already, right? People saying, well, that's seriously an impressive breakdown. I could totally see how it'd be put together, like stuff like this. Stuff like Neurosama's AI is so complex. I find myself having to read so many papers and docs to even get a grasp on it. I actually started uploading a lot of those longer technical PDFs to YoRead recently. It helps me absorb all the info when I'm doing chores or commuting, way easier than trying to sit down and read through everything. They say, funny enough, AI work is actually a lot simpler on some levels than traditional computing. That's the nature of it being self-learning, and most of the actual work has already been done for you to import into your project. So yeah, obviously a lot of people saying that, hey, you know, sometimes AI can sometimes be a little bit more, I guess, less complicated than regular mechanical coding, which I guess could be, yeah, I could understand that, because it ends up learning stuff itself rather than you having to tell it what to do, which obviously I think that is a very interesting thing, right? And I think there's a lot of very interesting, I guess, additions to this as to how this works, how Neurosama works. And I think it is something that a lot of the audience is interested in, right? And I think that is, one thing that makes Neurosama so appealing. I think there's the fan base that likes Neurosama and Evil and whatever for the interactions. They like it for the clips. They like it for, all of the stuff that comes out of what, Vedal has done and coded and essentially brought to life, right? And I think it is pretty crazy because you have the separate audience of, the clippers, the people that like the moments, and then you have the separate audience of like the people who are actually interested in the coding and the kind of, I guess, makeup of Neurosama behind the scenes, right? Which it creates like two completely different audiences. And I know that Vedal sometimes does streams where he shows off like the code and stuff that he's using and, how he does it, which I think is really, really great. And I think that honestly, it's just like the perfect mix of people that you really need. And I hope this has kind of, I guess, broken down a little bit more as to how Neurosama has actually worked in, VRChat and how clips like this have come to be, right? Because as I said, you got the people that are interested in this kind of stuff, and then you got the people that are interested in this kind of stuff, the moments that obviously come out of a lot of the technical things that we've been talking about in this video, which I think is just a great kind of combination of a community. And I think that is why the Swarm is so successful in terms of, I guess, keeping going and just having interesting things to talk about, right? Because as I said, it's very interesting, right? You don't have to be, I know there's a lot of anti-AI people and whatever, but I think it's actually a very interesting, from like a coding perspective of as to how this works, right? Because it's not just like slop or whatever. This is something that you can clearly see how much kind of components and things go into this to really make something like this work that Vedal has had to kind of work on in the background. So yeah, I mean, I just kind of wanted to cover that because I thought it was a very, very interesting topic from the Neurosama subreddit the other day. It seems like a lot of other people were very interested in it too. So I hope that kind of explained a little bit of how, it works or it could possibly work. Of course, Vedal will probably have to go into more specifics because I'm sure not everything is, 100% accurate. But again, I do think it is a very interesting idea. It is a very interesting kind of comment. And yeah, I'm very excited to see how Neurosama can turn out in the future as well, with even more advancements and even more learning as to, movements and whatever, because this is just the start, right? This one is just the start, and it still did look pretty damn good for its first, one of its first goes, which I think is pretty insane, right? But yeah, that's essentially all I got for this video. If you guys did enjoy it, don't forget to leave a like and subscribe. Also, go to GameSubs, use my code CASA, get 10% off. Again, they've got a ton of really cool stuff over there. Definitely recommend checking it out. They recently did a Code Vein 2 kind of collaboration. If you guys want to go check that out, I did put it up on my community posts as well. So yeah, you get 10% off that if you're a big Code Vein fan. And they've done a couple of collaborative, I think it's like a mouse pad and a couple of cups. So definitely go check that out. And yeah, I'll see you guys in the next one. That's all. See ya.